I say, as we heard yesterday and again this morning, the green transition is both a necessity and also potentially a huge opportunity. But we also have heard that its challenges are going to hit Europe's regions unevenly, and its opportunities may also be spread unevenly, and thus there is a risk of widening disparities and inequalities. So what we want to talk about today is how can cohesion policy help to ensure those ambitious goals of the European Green Deal can be achieved while ensuring a just and fair transition that leaves no one behind. Because we have heard many times, yesterday and again this morning, that this transition can only be successful, can only work if it has fairness and solidarity at its heart. So we want to talk about how we're going to achieve that and what we need to do. I am delighted to welcome speakers here and online. Marek Wozniak, President Marshal of Wielkopolska region in Poland and a member of the European Committee of the Regions, will be joining us online. Very warm welcome to you, sir. We also have with us Anna Koenig-Hjalmar, Mayor of Stockholm and a member of the Eurocities Executive Committee. Christian Averbeck, Board Member of the Climate Action Network. Andrej Kirjan, who is from the National Institute of Chemistry in Slovenia, and he's here also representing the Interreg Central Europe project, Biocompact CE Smart Regions. We have joining us with a video message in a little while, Zakia Katabi, Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and the Green Deal in Belgium. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, European Commission Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans unfortunately had to withdraw at the last moment and does send his apologies. The format for our discussion is going to be the same as it was yesterday. I've asked our speakers to make short opening remarks, and then we will get into the discussion. Commissioner Ferreira said yesterday when we started this event, she said, we're in your hands at this forum. We want to benefit from your expertise, your experience, your knowledge. So please do put your questions to our panels, also your comments. The only thing I ask is whether it is a question or a comment, please be as brief as you can. Share with me also, if you can, your name and organization. For those who are with us in the room, you can use the we have a 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, I think that's fixed itself. We can do it in the time-honored fashion. You raise your hand and someone will come to you with a microphone. For those of us joining us online, slido.com, use the QR code Cohesion Forum, and as I say, brief as possible. And if your question relates more to the digital transition, can I ask you to save that for later, focus now on the green. So let us get underway, and I would like to give the floor first to Marek Wozniak, who, as I said, President of the Wielkopolska region in Poland. Welcome, sir, and over to you. Can you hear me?
Dzień dobry, witam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie z Wielkopolski.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning from Poland, from Wielkopolska region. Well, this is a very special time. We'll be talking about threats to climate and how in Wielkopolska we try to address that. Well, I have to say honestly, this is not the first subject right now in this time, because we're going to have a 2 millionth refugee crossing the border to Poland today. It will probably be a woman or a child. These people keep coming in, including to my region. On the other hand, we have American aircraft landing on the airport 5 kilometers away from me, bringing weapons from 2 American soldiers. 2 kilometers away, there's an American military corps whose job is to protect the eastern wing of NATO, including Poland. And the inhabitants of my region are anxious when they think about the coming months and weeks. 350 kilometers from here, there are Russian missile systems that could totally devastate my country. We see how they do this. They are doing this to Ukrainian cities now. For us, this is a particular time. We have to think about European solidarity, about how to defend democracy from a totalitarian state, and how to build a better future for the European Union and our citizens, because cohesion policy is about building better future, better quality of life, better security, and happy prosperity. President von der Leyen said that cohesion policy is a success. Well, I'm so happy to be able to confirm this. My region, which is as big as Belgium, 3.5 million people, have made a lot of progress using European funds, cohesion funds, in the past decade or two. We've been a member of the European Union for almost 20 years. Our GDP per capita has risen by 24%. We are now a transition region. Our GDP per capita is now about 80%. So the rules to spend money for us are now different slightly. More focused on key pillars such as Green Deal, digitization, and social affairs. And we want to move ahead in this mainstream of European policies and programs. We, Poles, are a nation of Euro enthusiasts. There is 2.5 million of small companies working hard for us to develop. This crisis has, however, hit the economy too. A big factory of Volkswagen Group that is now has more than 100,000 orders for cars, but they had to stop production because they couldn't be supplied with components from Ukraine. So these are the consequences of that crisis for our economy. We almost had 60,000 Ukrainian workers who left to fight, and there are vacancies in our companies in Wielkopolska, so we struggle to produce. This is the status quo in our plans to implement our plans, but of course just transition and Green Deal is a challenge that here in Wielkopolska we want to face successfully, and I hope I'll say more to you about it later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. And as you said, and we have talked about the ways in which the European Union is showing solidarity with you at this very difficult time and helping as it can. And you said it's also about building a better future. Our conversation about the green transition, indeed part of that. But we are very mindful of what you are experiencing and living through at the moment. We'll come back on all of these issues a little bit later on. But it's now my pleasure to give the floor to Anna Koenig-Hjalmar, Mayor of Stockholm. You have a handheld microphone by your side.
Thank you. I'm so used to having the mic, but thank you so much for being here and so much for this initiative. And we were a few European mayors in the city network Eurocities yesterday that had the opportunity to talk to the mayor of Kiev yesterday for 1 hour, and he was, just telling us that we want to be a part of the European family. We belong mentally to the West now, to Europe, and that's why we are being attacked. So I think the cohesion policy, the things we are seeing now, is really, it's more important than ever, of course, but we should also be involved later on when hopefully we can rebuild the cities in Ukraine and show solidarity also there. But as was mentioned, we had another crisis, and many cities still live through it with the pandemic. And today we're going to talk about investments and rebuild a better future, but I would also like to address to use what we already have in a smarter way, and also to make the cohesion funds and cohesion policy to invest in the green transition. Just to give you one example, infrastructure. a lot of the cohesion policy funds is invested in infrastructure, and it's needed for Eastern Europe, for Southern Europe, of course, especially also in railways, digital infrastructure, but also roads. And in my city, for example, we are now thinking a lot, how can we use the effectiveness of the transport sector in a much better way? So if we electrify, we work with the business community, we work with the academia, then we can electrify all transport to 2030, and we can use what we have in a much smarter way. If it's silence, the logistic, it can go nighttime. We don't have to invest also in new infrastructure. The logistic could go at night. The noise pollution today is an obstacle for us building new homes for young people, for example. So suddenly we have areas, if it's electrified, that we can build new apartments and so on. But it's also cleaner air. We can reduce asthma attacks amongst children, and we can just bring public values as clean air, clean water. And I think that is also really important for us to discuss. So then we need batteries. And we can see a really interesting transformation in the rural areas in my country, where we have companies, together with researchers, investing in batteries that have 80% lower carbon footprints than the traditional production. Then they create jobs, they create investment, both in my city, the capital, but also in the northern part, in the rural areas, where people used to move, where they had brain drains. And today they actually have big meetings at the university in Stockholm asking engineers to move back. And they want to. They're moving back with their families, with their competence, and the students are searching for the universities in a degree we haven't seen before, because they want to be involved in the impact that these industries are making. So just one example, it creates jobs in the rural areas, but also in the urban areas. And I think that's a great initiative to see that the values that the green transition and the innovation brings.
And also important because we often focus on the need for new breakthrough technologies, where do we need to, and the focus on the research and innovation agenda, which is absolutely needed. But as you said, many things we can do with what we already have, so innovation in our way of thinking. But come back on how that can be best supported. Christian Averbeck, very warm welcome from Climate Action Network. Your opening thoughts.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanking for giving me the opportunity to share some views that we've got. Actually, yesterday, Commissioner Ferreira mentioned that the cohesion policy brings a lot of growth. And while appreciating that, I would like to make or present three messages. One, we need to get rid of fossil fuels as fast as possible. I think the actual crisis, the war in the Ukraine, reminds us of how precious our life is and how important cohesion is, especially in the EU. How we become stronger once we are united and we stand together. And while facing the crisis, it becomes obvious that our dependency on fossil fuels is not only a climate problem, but also a geopolitical and a humanitarian one. It is important that we fulfill the demands of the Paris Agreement and to become the first climate-neutral continent. And I think it becomes obvious better, faster than initially planned. The impacts of the war in Ukraine are diverse and most challenging. But the need for a fast structural change is obvious. So the message is clear: we need to get rid of fossil fuels as fast as possible. My second message is we must massively invest in renewables and in energy efficiency measures, and also we should become an enabler of a just transition. To achieve that, we must put all our efforts in future technologies. And the good news is, and I know all of you know it, all solutions are available and affordable. So we just must use them. Therefore, we must invest massively in renewables and in energy efficiency measures to become independent. And so therefore, we think that the cohesion policy must ensure the big investments in a sustainable future. That actually we think was not done in the multi-annual financial framework in the last one. It was actually not a good example as such, because on average EU member states allocated only roughly 10% of their European Regional Development Fund and Cohesion Fund to energy efficiency, renewable energy and related infrastructure and research and innovation. So this has to change to reach our goals. But also the new MFF, we are not seeing enough investments into climate-friendly infrastructure and measures, and the regulations are not strict enough to avoid a lock-in with gas or even with nuclear infrastructure. I mean, you can imagine that we as civil society were not happy about the latest decision on the taxonomy. Actually, to us, it's catastrophic, even stronger in the light now of the war in Ukraine, which totally shifted the debate on gas. So we also must invest to ensure just transitions in Europe. For example, the coal regions, and talking about Poland, across Europe can be also the driver of the change. And we just reflected on it, the opportunities that we've got. Social justice also has to mean climate justice. So therefore, we need instruments in place, such as the Social Climate Fund, to help the poor to adapt to the wanted change and to the transition. Otherwise, our big project will fail. And my third and last message is civil society has to play a crucial role in all these structural changes, and the transformation processes have to be designed inclusive and pan-European. So cohesion policy should be the frame to design tailored interventions rooted in the local communities.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll come back on that
Okay, thank you.
in our discussion. And as you say, that importance of differentiated approaches, tailored approaches, absolutely central. I want to talk about, we talked yesterday about the partnership principle that's at the core of this policy. What does that mean in practice in this area? But let's continue to build our picture of where we are. Delighted to welcome André Cohesion. André, your opening thoughts.
Thank you very much. Well, let me first thank the Commissioner for being here, for letting us have this event and having an opportunity to speak to you. I would like to add to this discussion with a view of some experiences and actually from the field of implementing cohesion. I come from research, and I've had the privilege in the past few years to coordinate projects, international projects focused on biodegradable plastics, marine litter, microplastics, biocomposites, all green topics connected to our use of plastics. And these were not research projects. These were Interreg projects, in one case a pre-accession instrument project, in which we had partners from up to 7 countries, for example. And we premised this project in such a way that we try to release the potential of existing research. We have a lot of research already existing going on in our regions, in our countries, and we can get more from it if we give it proper connections to stakeholders they're not in contact with, to achieve impacts such as capacity building, raising awareness, industrial development, and of course supporting policy. And I can give you an example. We connected an Italian expert in paper recycling with knowledge about plastics from Slovenia and a center for packaging development in Poland. And you get more all of a sudden than you had before. It's very important to bring together stakeholders from different sides: administration, NGOs, academia, companies, clusters, associations, different ones. For example, NGOs are excellent in communicating to get the message out. clusters, chambers of commerce, and so on, associations, allow you to access a lot of companies all at the same time and have a great impact. So what happens in a project like that is actually both personal and institutional. First of all, you get people that are strangers from different countries, and they form teams. At the end, they are friends. They can work together, and they always continue working together. That's my experience from a number of cases. I have, for example, right now, outside the project, a Hungarian cluster working with a Polish development center. I've just been told by a Croatian partner that they've successfully certified a new compostable product with the help of the Italian university laboratory. So this goes on. People may change jobs. We just need to actually set the process in motion. And we have to leave a trace. We need websites, contacts, videos, documents. It's got to be there. And when there's a need, people find it and come back. I'm always amazed how this happens. And people come to you and say, oh, I found this, or we did this based on your work. And it's like, I had no idea. One lesson that I learned from it is actually that you have to let time pass and results will come. They really always do. And it's hard to predict where at what time, in what direction. Maybe just one emphasis more. I think territorial programs are extremely important. They bring together neighbors that very often have shared challenges. They can work together, and they will always be in proximity, so they can continue working together. I think that's very important. And I would like to also stress the importance of managing authorities in making these things happen. I was always amazed by the managing authority for Central Europe in how efficient and organized they were. And I think they need support, and they need the appreciation as well. So to finish, I believe that we have the tools, we have the vehicles, and if we impose the topics of the Green Deal and smart specialization in our regions and countries, on top of this, I think we have everything available to make lasting change in the direction we want to go, in regions and very close to citizens. So I think we're on a good route.
Thank you very much for that upbeat note at a time when so many of our challenges seem somewhat insurmountable. Let us complete the picture before we get into discussing all these very important issues you've been raising with a video message from Zakia Khattabi, Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and the Green Deal in Belgium. Let's hear what she has to say.
Dear colleagues and experts, in Belgium, as in many other countries in Europe, this summer we have been confronted with extreme weather. After 3 days of heavy rainfall, floods took the lives of 41 people, made many more wounded and destroyed numerous houses and caused more than 2.1 billion euros worth in damages. Analysis showed that the neighborhoods that were hit hardest were those most socioeconomically vulnerable. This shows that our current common failure to operate inside the limits of our planet is already causing deaths, costing us billions, and hitting those most vulnerable and often the least responsible the hardest. It is our responsibility to make sure the EU operates within the planetary boundaries while making sure no one is left behind. The European Union and its member states have in this regard already taken important steps in the framework of the Green Deal by rolling out programs, providing investments and developing new policies. Delivering on the Green Deal ambitions is the biggest challenge of our times and will demand unprecedented efforts from our European businesses, workers and citizens. It will be crucial to ensure that both the costs and the opportunities that this transition will bring about are fairly distributed. To achieve this, we have to take into account the concerns, ideas and the realities of all these actors and work together with them to design the right solutions. This is why I will launch a national conference on just transition in Belgium that will run for the next 2 years. During this process, we will extensively call on citizens, trade unions, employers, civil society, activists and academics to come to a broad consensus on how to shape the just transition in Belgium. Together, we'll ensure that our ambitious green policy will be acceptable for all actors and that this transition will also reduce inequality. Both in Belgium and in Europe, people, workers and enterprises will not accept an unfair transition. And rightfully so. Rising the prices of polluting but essential goods without providing alternatives or support cannot be part of a just transition. Closing down sectors without providing quality reskilling and creating sufficient new employment opportunities cannot be part of a just transition. Abandoning countries and regions for which the impacts of the transition will be the toughest cannot be part of a just transition. It is our duty to rise to the task and show the full power of European solidarity. The cohesion policy is an excellent instrument to speed up both the green and just transitions because it has always had the leave no one behind principle at its heart. It has invested in infrastructure and in people, and it has resulted in significant growth to economies and massive improvement in well-being for millions of Europeans in more disadvantaged regions. Today, however, we are facing new challenges. I strongly believe that the new cohesion policy programs have the potential to deliver, if they are rolled out in the right way.
So, Minister Katabi there, ladies and gentlemen, let us dive straight into discussion. I see one question already coming in on slido.com. Don't hesitate to write your questions, and audience here in the room, I'll be coming out to you in a little while. But perhaps I could come back to you, President Wozniak. We heard from Andres there some very concrete examples of the difference that projects funded through cohesion policy are making. For you, how do you, when it comes to the Green Deal goals, to the green transition, how much difference are those funds making now, and how important will they be for countries like yours? We'll come to the specific issue of the just transition in a moment, but in general terms, how important will they be in order to deliver and seize the opportunities? Because it's going to be difficult, particularly for a country like yours, but how key are they for those opportunities? President Wozniak, did you hear me? I'm not sure he...
Tak, oczywiście bardzo chętnie odpowiem.
Yes, certainly, I'll answer quite gladly. Well, using cohesion funds for climate is something we have been doing for quite a few years. What matters a lot is to use these funds to support renewable energy projects. An example that people see is what we call umbrella projects from local government for the citizens. We have managed to develop a lot of prosumer photovoltaic sources of energy. So these umbrella projects on the scale of a few dozen of thousands of people have managed to convince people to join in, use their own money and build this kind of installations. So that's something that people see. It's quite a scale. People want to have these PV installations on their roofs. Another example that is quite visible in my region, an example of a project, is a transport project, electric transport project based on electric buses or hybrid buses, but the purely electric part is growing. We are one of the leaders in Poland in terms of projects using hydrogen as fuel, especially for bigger vehicles, road vehicles, buses, and vehicles on rails. We have very well developed railway network. We have two companies that provide regional transport for inhabitants, and we'd like to replace all vehicles that are now using diesel engines with hydrogen-based vehicles, electric vehicles using hydrogen as a source. Now, another thing we do is to equip our cities with ways to use bicycles. Different hubs where you can change from your bicycle to public transport, because obviously transport is a major source of CO2 emissions. If we manage to change the habits of our inhabitants so they can use low emission or zero emission transport sources, modes, then of course emission will be lower. And we have been quite successful at it already. I think people are beginning to understand they need to change their habits.
Of how much difference this is making, and in the future, where do you see it having, where should the investments be focused, EU money particularly?
Oczywiście tutaj
Well, we will develop energy in this respect. We have much to do in terms of energy investments. We have to make up for lost time. Remember that Polish energy in 70% is based on lignite and hard coal combustion. In my region, by 2030, we will discontinue lignite extraction. At this stage, part of the power generators were closed, the ones fired by lignite. Some will continue to be functional, but we have this deadline of 2030 that we want to phase out extraction of lignite, which means that the generators need other fuels. And this is our absolute deadline, 2030, for emissions.
It's an important transition for your region. We'll come back on the role of the Just Transition Fund in all of that in a moment. But Madam Mayor, if I could ask you really the same question in terms of the impact that cohesion policy funding has had to date and how you see it, because of course in this programming period at least 30% of ERDF money, we heard yesterday, 37% of cohesion fund investments must go on green initiatives. Where do you see that money making the biggest difference?
Of course, energy is one important sector, and so many countries within EU depending on coal. And if we are heading towards electrification, then we need to ask where does the energy comes from. So of course we have to put and invest a huge amount in research when it comes to renewable energy sources, but of course also charging infrastructure. For a city as Stockholm is also very expensive, but I can imagine for many other cities this will need a lot of investment, and work with researchers to be more proactive. Today we can work with researchers to tell us through sensors where in our city where we have the largest effect when it comes to heat waves, for example, and not in 10 years. So we can actually today make better decisions based on the proactive result from data. So that's a close collaboration we need with researchers, because I think in many ways researchers and business are, they are ahead of politicians sometimes, and then we need to catch up to see what can we do when it comes to regulations and so on, to have the same kind of ambition, because there's a lot of frustration sometimes as well. But investments, of course, in renewable, in also when it comes to skills, new skills that will be needed. We know that, for example, to work with installing solar panels is a few months of education. And that could also create jobs in segregated areas or in rural areas. So it's possibilities also there to show what kind of new skills is needed. And of course also the digital transformation that needs also to reskill the people we have. In the same kind of theme, use what you have in a much smarter way. And then it's also human capital that is a part of that, of course.
Thank you very much indeed. Andres, you were talking about the importance for you, the impact of the projects you've done. In terms of the focus of money now, where do you think it needs to be? Where can the EU deliver, if I can use a very American expression, maximum bang for bucks?
Well, I think we have to be very ambitious, and I think the initiative Fit for 55 is actually very good. Let's go ahead with that. Let's try to do that. Let's try to do even more. But there has to be investment, as was said, in research that will come with results in the future. We need to invest in actual systems, buses, charging stations, and so on. But I think there's also one more point. We need to keep our citizens, cities, regions in the system. This is something that has to be close to them. We need to convince them. There are many people that do not believe. And there are many people that take advantage of that and try to emphasize that, as Professor Stiglitz mentioned. This is a serious obstacle that needs to be addressed. It has to be close to the people. They have to accept this. We have to show them this is good for them. We have to measure them. If you tell somebody you have emitted so much less CO2, they feel proud. It's dumb. But also one more thing, it's not only CO2, it's resources, water, other resources as well. And we have also very simple methods. We can have green roofs, white roofs, we can use water coming from precipitation, we can clean water, reuse it. I mean, we can do a lot of things.
Thank you very much. Christian, you enumerated 3 key areas, 3 key focuses that we need to have. Specifically the role here of cohesion policy funds. Where do you think it should be focused?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned it before, and I think it was even highlighted by the others, that, investing in renewables, I think that is the solution. But the hidden champion is also energy efficiency, in the building sector. And I think that it's not that sexy. I can imagine that it is not that interesting for politicians to go into these kind of funding of efficiency measures, but it is so necessary, and I would really encourage you to do more on these issues, as we can really can make big advances by pushing for it. The other thing I would like to highlight is it is really crucial now that we have limited resources. Now more money will be spent on defense, more money will be spent on health issues, as we know, and the funds are so needed. So therefore, when we look, for example, at hydrogen and looking at the use of hydrogen, don't waste it by using it in cars. Don't waste it in the heating sector, but really use it wisely to decarbonize our steel industry, for example, or our chemistry industry. So I think it's also important now to use the funds that we've got in a wise way and not spread it all over a different project that might be a good idea.
Which could link us, you mentioned earlier, to our smart specialization discussions and regions identifying where the opportunities are and then using the money, as you say, smartly. You wanted to come back in, Madam Mayor.
Yes, I just thought it was a really interesting perspective to use the citizens and to make it, they're transparent, the data, so they can also be more engaged in what's going on. And just one example, I think it's great. I also am very active in C40 network, 90 cities around the world, but we are now introducing Breathe London, but on a global scale, that we see that if we work with citizens, if we have data through sensors, they will be aware of the air quality every day in their daily lives, in their neighborhood, where they move around, and then they also would put pressure. We've seen that in cities. If the air quality is bad, then they will demand, initiatives from politicians. So that's just one example. Make the data transparent and real time as much as possible, because then I'm sure that the citizens will put pressure on the ones, create policy ahead. But also mentioning water, I think that's also a very interesting perspective. And we used the Cohesion Fund also to collaborate with other regions throughout the Baltic Sea, and also to reduce chemicals and help household and businesses to reduce chemicals, to have a more clean water. So that's also one perspective, not only traffic and infrastructure, of course.
I wanted to come on to this issue. We've heard some very stark warnings from our speakers about the consequences if we don't make sure that this transition is fair, is just, is perceived to be, and that we do the maximum to help those regions that will be hardest hit by it to turn, I think it was Professor Perez said, those job-destroying opportunities into job-creating. President Wozniak, you talked about your plans to discontinue lignite production by 2030 and the other transitions that you're making. How important for you is the new Just Transition Fund to deal with those uneven impacts, those asymmetric shocks for regions like yours that have a big transformation to undergo? And how can we use it most effectively?
Jak rozumiem, to jest pytanie do mnie.
Yes, I will respond to this question. It is very important to deal with the social impacts. I'd like to describe the situation in part of my region where we have a lignite extraction and where we have power generators that use this fuel. In that region, we have a very specific social and economic situation, because this sector was a dominating sector, and this sector organized life around the mines, around the power generators, and it gave a feeling of economic security. There weren't alternatives really for employment, very few SMEs. Most people who actually were in work worked for these big companies, and the companies organized everything, even time of leisure. They constructed various cultural institutions, provided ways of spending free time. And once these big entities are not employing people anymore, we have a lack of economic activity and a threat for workers that used to work in mines. They have to find new employment, they have to reskill, they have to get used to the idea that they will earn less than they used to in these big companies based on lignite, big energy companies. So we need to create jobs, we need to enable people to requalify, gain different skills, help them in setting up their own company. That's not that easy. We also have to create a new quality of life based on new proposal in terms of culture, tourism. We have to create recreate the region and recreate its image for it to be attractive for young inhabitants, because we do not want young people to leave the region. Young people might throw in the towel and just go elsewhere. That's a real threat, and we should deal with the situation through a good social dialogue, and we should channel funds that will finance various projects. We are planning such measures. We are also holding public consultations with all stakeholders of public life. 3 days ago, I sent to Brussels a regional operational program, and there we have the Just Transition funds. I'm waiting for the approval on the part of the European Commission. That's 2 billion zlotys. 2 billion euros, 400 million for the Just Transition funds. So we are very hopeful.
Very much. Christiane, you mentioned this in your opening remarks about becoming an enabler of this just transition. What's the key for you to use this money as effectively as possible?
I mean, enabler is, for example, I share with you this idea of the transition or transformation regions. We've got, for example, in Germany, the region of North Rhine-Westphalia, where they are also confronted with all these huge transformation processes. And actually, I think that it is important that we make sure that the people on the ground have the chance to be part and parcel of these transformation processes, that they are given the opportunity to participate in creating ideas on how to go about the structural changes, how they can find new jobs, how they can develop their own ideas, how the future of the region should look like. And actually, for that, we also need a good leadership, because that is lacking in many regions. As in the regions, the people are more, the leaders are still more with the energy companies and with the interests of the industries than with the interests of the people that want change in the area and who have to make it possible that change is taking place.
And Madam Mayor, you were talking earlier about the citizens and their key role in this. For you, the importance of the Just Transition Fund, and if I could throw into the discussion a question from someone in our audience. Andre simply describes himself first name. How can member states ensure that just transition investments do not support the creation of cheap labour jobs? So it's not just about new jobs, but quality jobs. I don't know whether you have a thought on that as well.
No, but of course that also is important, and I think that one thing that was mentioning in the beginning was also the importance now for investing in also digital infrastructure and a high-speed internet, and I think that could also create quality jobs for the future. And especially now after the pandemic, more and more companies say that you can work, I mean, not for everyone, of course, but many workers can stay at the office 2 days and then work from a bigger region than before. And you can see also that people actually now are moving to other regions or close by, and then they can take the train into the working place 2 days a week. So it's transforming also the labor market. And some companies say you can work wherever you want. You can just register, but you just have to have access to high-speed internet. So it's truly important that that kind of investment is pushed forward. But also working with digitalization and higher quality within the regions and in the cities. For example, after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, we saw disabled people, elderly people was socially isolated. Through digital technique, they could also, be in contact with relatives and others and have a much richer life. But then also our employers had to be reskilled so they could also help. So it's a lot of, initiatives that will lead, I think, also to higher quality through digitalization. But of course, we should always be aware and ask, how is it produced, by whom, what does the city or the region procure, or the nation, and have high demands, not only for the footprint, the ecological footprint, of course also the social, how is it produced, where, and to follow through research that have data that can also see the life cycle analyze and everything.
And that's why, of course, also this focus, we always talk about the twin transitions, because as you said, they go intrinsically hand in hand. Andres, just as a startup, someone who's been involved with a startup, in terms of creating these new job opportunities, particularly in regions where that challenge is greatest, it's the biggest transformation. How do you see it from a perspective of someone right at the front end of creating these new jobs we're talking about?
Well, I was a victim of my own projects, working with companies and being impatient because they didn't implement all the ideas we had. So when I had an opportunity, I entered a startup making devices that stop microplastics pollution. And I have to say there again, the European support is of critical value. I mean, we worked hard and got a European Innovation Council grant, which really makes a huge difference. Startups need support, they need investment, they need, let's say, smart and patient investors, and I think that's perhaps where we're still a little bit lacking. It's very difficult to get that, but you need it. You absolutely need it, especially if you want to go global, if you want to really make an impact, if you're opening a new niche that doesn't exist. That's very demanding and it requires support. And I'm thinking we're perhaps a little bit lacking there. If I may just one comment on what was said before. I think we need to make green transition very honest. I'm very afraid of greenwashing or window dressing just to get the money. And the comment that like somebody is more on the side of the industry or big industry, I think this must be a win-win for citizens, industry, and society, for all of us. People should not be afraid that the lignite mine will be closed, and this is now a danger for them, so green transition is endangering them. That should not be the case at all. And also, if there's a steel mill or cement producer, that they see Green Deal as a really big problem, that's not the case. Should be helped, that they can be leading. And I think this should be shown as a win-win also for the industry at a European level. If we manage this transition, we can sell these technologies, we can be leaders globally, and that is what we want. So that is actually at stake.
Which brings us back to issues like skilling, reskilling, you mentioned it earlier, in order to give people the tools to take advantage. Can we have the house lights up? Let me just see, there are some questions online which I'll take in a moment, but is there anyone in the room who would like to join our discussion? If you would, speak now. Okay, you have one there? Yes, please. And please introduce yourself and please be brief. Thank you. No? Okay. Let me take a couple from the... there's one right over on this side. Do we have anyone with a microphone on this side? I tell you what, while the microphone's coming down, let me take one from our written audience and then we'll come to you. Carl Smith asks, and I think this is one really for you, Madam Mayor, how is smart urban planning helping to support the reduction of climate emissions and tackle the tendencies of suburbanization and promoting a good level of density? Is this an issue you've been looking at?
Yeah, urban planning is crucial for us in this work, and we work with reducing heavy traffic to see the numbers of green jobs that could be developed, and of course density is also a positive. It's positive for the climate environment. If you have the density, you can have also smarter solutions as district heating, for example. That is a great holistic solutions for bringing heat and energy and reusing it. So we work very closely with different property owners, together with the cities and researchers, to have, in everything we do, if we procure, logistic for construction sites. We have demands that they, until 2030, should be electrified, but also, of course, that will reduce the transportation. We use the material with life cycle analysis to see what kind of material are we using, and so on. So, and also, of course, the environment that people will live, to involve the citizens, as was mentioning, because you need them also to support the transformation.
Absolutely. So there was one, I think, yeah, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Viktor Svalanis. I'm from Latvia, Association of Major Cities of Latvia. So I have a question for Christian. I totally agree what you are saying about that we have this chance now to move to this, to push this Green Deal, and so it works. In Latvia we are doing it already, like changing from diesel to electric buses and that kind of things. Even in bigger things, like changing heating system in total city, like going from gas to other sources. And I would like to ask you about the Germany. Like, what's the situation like at the moment? We know how hard it is to cut off the gas pipe, and we are doing it already for a few years ago. We already started to doing it, and how it will impact the Green Deal, like this situation that we got Nord Stream 2.
Okay, got your question. Yes. Got your question. Can you help, Christian?
Actually, I'm actually happy that I'm not the German government representative here, but civil society, because actually we want the German government before that we didn't want Nord Stream 2 as civil society. So actually we are really in trouble, and I understand very well, although I think that our government is more proactive now on getting into more renewables and so on, but that we are really confronted with a difficult situation, that we are so dependent on gas that actually me as a citizen of Germany, I'm really shocked to realize how dependent we are, and also the implication that it has for the whole of Europe. But allow me not to, I mean, I cannot...
Indeed not, no, you're not here to comment for the government. No, that's fine.
No, but let me share with you that at least we as civil society organizations fought against it. And I can tell you, I mean, we realized that when we as civil society organizations pushed for the coal phase out, we noticed that more and more the gas lobby became stronger and stronger in Germany. And as civil society organizations, we cannot compete with the forces or with the strength.
Thank you.
Anyway.
We don't have time to spend longer on that now, because I want to come to, there are two other issues I'd like to touch on with you all. One is related to a question from our audience from John Deere, who says, could cohesion policy support pan-European approaches to tackle climate crisis, such as the EU missions and new European Bauhaus? And that really brings me to the question of joined-up thinking and synergies, and we spoke about this yesterday. We have sources of funding for the green transition, European sources, national sources, local sources, different programs, cohesion policy, Horizon Europe, many, many different sources of funding for this. How do we ensure alignment, and do we need more to link up these different initiatives? How do you see that issue? President Wozniak, from your perspective, all these different resources, potential sources of money, how do we ensure we really exploit the synergies between them?
Myślę, że to nie jest jakiś problem. Tak jak
I don't think this is a particular challenge. We have a regional operational program. We have three funds, the European Fund for Regional Development, the European Social Fund, and the Just Transition Fund. So in one regional program, we have three European funds, and we have various needs arising from the Green Deal and the whole region. And also we have a specific situation that requires intervention in the transformation region after phasing out coal. So the absorption of these funds is at the regional level. We have management. We have decentralized management for funds. 40% of funds are in the hands of regions. In terms of our cohesion policy, and the Just Transition Fund is at our disposal. We can manage these three sources, and we will set about attaining the goals in cooperation with the European Commission. We will also emphasize the Green Deal in all interventions, and also in the specific interventions of just transformations to deal with the aftermath of closing down mines and reformatting our energy, moving towards renewables. I have to add that the mines that will be closed down, the lignite mines, they are also building photovoltaic resources, and also they will be building windmills. So the same company will transform itself, moving from more conventional sources of energy to renewable sources of energy. So we have projects of this kind. So we do have synergy.
And Madam Mayor, same question really to you. We've heard a lot yesterday and today about the importance of coherence, of coordination, of complementarity between the different sources of funding, and this question from our audience about policy initiatives like European Bauhaus. How do you see it? Do you see President Wozniak saying, actually, it's not really an issue, we can deal with this? Does cohesion policy give you the flexibility that you need now? Much has been made of the new flexibilities under the new programming period. Are you happy that this doesn't need to be a difficult issue to resolve?
I think that it's great to have flexibility, and we are working with, for example, if we use the social fund, if we see a lack of skills, for example, in our more segregated areas, and we can target them to our needs and the different groups' needs. But of course, we can always work more together. So I wouldn't say that we are finished. I think that we still have, a journey ahead to combining all the different funds within the EU, but also on a national and a regional. And of course, as a mayor, I represent the cities, and we're very close to the citizens. So of course, we want to be there as well, because we are very agile and transforming in a very fast-paced. So use us. That's also my wish more.
And of course, it's not just about funding, is it, Christian? It's also about, we come back, you were talking earlier about the crucial role of civil society. Andre was talking earlier about how important it is to bring the stakeholders together. That partnership principle, which is at the heart of cohesion policy, so it's not just about the money and using it, but it is this partnership. How do you see, when you talk about the role of civil society, how can we make it more effective, really working together, making sure we always have all the relevant stakeholders around the table? What do you see as key here?
I think I gave you the example before, of the region in North Rhine-Westphalia where we have these transformation processes taking place. And I can see that the interest and the will is there to involve civil society, but it seems that still the way how to go about it is not yet clear, or people are not sure how to involve civil society. And I'm not sure how it is in other countries of Europe, but I thought that at least in Germany we are quite advanced, but still I can see that the concrete example shows that that is still lacking. I don't know if you have good examples in Europe where these transformation processes by involving civil society organizations were key, and it worked. I think we need more of these examples, and they should be shared. And the good examples should be then even implemented in other parts of Europe.
And Andre, you spoke very passionately about the cooperation, the benefits, how transformative the work that you've done in projects has been. How do you see making sure and building on that partnership principle as we move forward?
I think this is actually a very fundamental question that comes back to what was discussed already today, our democracy. This is a part of democracy. It's very easy to exclude a difficult NGO or something like that. It's really nice, but it's not good. You need them, they must be included, and that's a transparency issue, and it brings to light actually the importance of authorities at different levels that manage the system, because they set the stage. You can have a push towards, I don't know, another better coal-fired power plant, or a road that will, I don't know how, reduce emissions. That has to be very honest, and there has to be a check on it from civil society, and it's a difficult thing, and I agree. That's always tricky to do.
And Madam Mayor, you said we can always work better together. We were referring there to alignment of funding and so on. But in terms of working with the Christians of this world, with the Andres of this world, all the people who need to be round the table, do you think as the EU we can do better? And how important is that to develop really effective differentiated approaches that really are tailored to the specific needs of individual regions and cities like yours?
But that's crucial, of course, and everyone, I mean, academia, NGOs, civil society, but also business community should really work together, and also to present. I mean, this is the data and the effect of our collaboration of what we've done, so we can also scale it. So it's not just, small projects, it's actually scalable and very close to the citizens. So I think that is crucial. And just one example, in our city, we work very close with the pacts for different causes. It could be climate pact, where we work to reduce emissions, or microplastic. We use integration pact, where we're trying to, match employers with newcomers, and now we use it for the Ukraine refugees, for example, and also to electrify transport. We work with Volkswagen and Scania and so on, just to electrify, together with researchers. But NGOs could be a part of that too. But then we have the same goal, and that could also be on the EU level, that you set up goals, you set up pacts, and you work together, and also to measure that you're on the right way, the right path.
President Wozniak, a thought on this as well, if you would. Ursula von der Leyen this morning underlined in her speech the importance of, as she put it, going local, saying people like yourselves are absolutely, you're the people who know best. But in terms of these partnerships and how to make them work, not just between different levels of governance, which she was really referring to, but also with stakeholders, what are you doing, and how key will this be as you move forward?
To jest kwestia właściwie najważniejsza.
I think this is a basic issue of our just transition. We want to create a forum where all the stakeholders will be present from the region. This will be a regional forum of just transition. Such forum exists, and we have trade unions that represent workers that represent their views there, because workers will partly lose their jobs, partly will have to be reskilled. There will be representatives of academia, there will be representatives of companies that are potential new employers. So they are very interested in the future of the region, and that way they will develop in an economic sense. Various NGOs are also present in this forum. They are very active in the field of of environmental protection. Let's remember how devastating lignite mines are. Mining is very bad for the environment, and NGOs are very active also at the European level, so they try to gain information from different sources. The forum also consists of citizens that are interested in their future. And there are various thematic groups that meet on a regular basis. They broach various future-oriented issues. For example, they talk about improving the cultural aspect, improving the landscape, improving the environment, improving the entrepreneurial culture, transportation. There are various fields, and it's a live organism that is debating on so many issues connected to just transformation. So we do not have an economic domination of this forum. No, we have citizens' pressure to implement solutions that are not harmful to the citizens. Thank you.
Good examples like that of what can be done. We are almost out of time, but I want to, and I'm going to go in the reverse order to the way I gave you the floor at the beginning, and it is my usual unfair question. But as we go away from this Cohesion Forum and we look to what do we need to do next, and Commissioner Ferreira was asking us at the beginning for really concrete thoughts, suggestions on where we go from here. For each of you, and I'll start with you, Andres, then Christian, then Madam Mayor, and then I will give the final word to President Wozniak. If you had to identify of all the topics and issues we've discussed over the last hour or so, the most important priority for you, or a key next step to ensure that cohesion policy delivers to the maximum in helping to foster this transition and, crucially, making it just and socially fair. Andre?
Well, I think we have to...
Oh, yep.
I think we need to stay the course, be very ambitious, and be inclusive. Put all our efforts to cover that.
Thank you very much. Christian?
Actually, we have to accelerate climate action and the energy transition now with a longer-term vision. I think that is crucial with a radical shift in our production and consumption models.
So it is combining that short-term urgent action with a long-term vision, which is what cohesion policy is all about. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. But I would wish to invest in research, especially artificial intelligence. I think Europe has a huge potential in that, combined with the green transition. But of course, education for the young people, reskilling, upskilling workers, lifelong learning, and of course also to invest in entrepreneurs, to invest in innovation, and also to transform even faster when it comes to clean energy. I think that is today and what's happening in the world, it's more important than ever with the energy issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. President Wozniak, you have the last word, your key priority moving forward.
Well, it is to have this transition in a way that people will accept, make it safe. This change will protect climate. In the case of our region, it's about protecting water resources. They are in a horrible condition. It's one of the driest regions in Europe, so we'll have to focus on that. We'll need some flexibility around how to use these funds. Our programming now is quite rigid, but we know that the world changes quickly. We need flexibility, and I hope that cooperation with the Commission and its services will be good so that we can adapt to the changing world. I have a certain dream that may sound a bit controversial here. What we need in Poland now is nuclear energy, because if we only were to have renewable resources, the question would be, so what? How are we going to have electricity if there is no wind and a lot of clouds? to put it so simply. We need an alternative source that could be acceptable as part of Green Deal. We need that, and we don't have it in Poland.
Thank you. I wish we had another hour and we could delve into that in detail, but unfortunately we are out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are with us in the room, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed for a great discussion. And thank you, President Wozniak, for joining us in absentia. It is now time for lunch. We will restart again at 2 o'clock sharp with a panel where we will focus on the other part of that twin transition, the digital transition, and many of the issues we've discussed this morning we'll come back to later on. So enjoy your lunch, whether here or if you're watching us virtually, and I'll see you back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.